you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. I learned this the hard way with my first company, so I created NetSuite, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you the visibility and control you need to make smart decisions and grow with confidence. That's why companies who use NetSuite grow 3 times faster than the S&P 500.
Schedule your free product tour right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. Today, we're discussing 2024 review and our top 5 predictions for 2025, plus other tech headlines for the week. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available the following week wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite. Their ERP solution helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance, and IRPA AI members and followers get preferred pricing of 45% off at irpaai.com/netsuite. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI and the Digital Enterprise Institute. We're a professional association, media, peer-to-peer research network that provides education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members worldwide, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. I'm joined today by my co-host, Chris Surdak. He's a senior advisor to IRPA AI, an author, a consultant, and was formerly White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, partner for digital transformation at Gartner, and AI practice lead at EY. Chris, we made it. It's the last show of the year.
Hard to believe. What is it? Was 2025 right around the corner? Holy cow. A quarter of the century's passed.
It's, every year we say this, like it kind of sneaks up on us. But yeah, I feel like we were just coming back from summer, and here we are. I think it was the week that we didn't have between Thanksgiving and Christmas, or between Thanksgiving and December 1st this year. Usually have that extra week, and caught us all. And I knew it was coming, but still kind of caught me off guard. But anyway, last show of the year. We're taking off the next couple weeks for holidays, but we didn't want the year to end without kind of recapping what we've seen this year, and maybe leaving with some predictions for next year. So I've got a few. I know, Chris, you have a few, and we'll get to that in a moment. But before we go there, our headlines this week, I mean, the top one, at least in my neck of the woods, Chris, is drones. Drones everywhere. What's going on? Come on, you're a former NSA guy. Tell everybody what's really going on here.
So the drones are there. I mean, I almost had my pilot's license. I did, and I flew in the New Jersey airspace. So and New York airspace. So I can guarantee you that these are on radar. People see it. It's not at a loss. The explanations appear to be at a loss, which in and of itself is fairly telling. I think that the assurance is that the government does know what they are and what they're doing there. They just don't necessarily want us to know. It's not necessarily a bad thing necessarily, but yeah, I mean, your eyes aren't lying to you. I mean, I have my little drone right here, 10 feet behind me. I fly it all the time. The big drones are kind of interesting because those are fairly expensive for just Joe Schmo to have, and they're designed to carry payloads to do things. So, I think hang tight. It's probably not a Santa Claus sighting. Hopefully Santa doesn't run into him, next week if he's flying low over New Jersey, over your house, let's say. And I expect some sort of reveal to come. I heard that at least one police department actually caught one. Was that yesterday or the day before?
Yeah.
So, now that Game of Thrones is over, we need a whole new series. So now we have this, I guess.
I was like, drone attack. It sounds like something from the 70s. Like it was Mars attack, drone attack.
Oh, wait, that's episode 2 of Star Wars, right? Attack of the Drones.
Yeah.
Here we are.
No surprise there, but I've of course, I'm in New York and do a lot in New York, New Jersey, whatever. And at first I was kind of ignoring the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, it's just sensationalized news or what have you. But like, what's that old adage? Until it comes for you. So then all of a sudden it went from being over New Jersey to being over my hometown on Long Island. And, you know, when you see those things and they're the size of a van, which I didn't realize at first either, and it's, you know, over your house, all of a sudden it has a different urgency to it. I've heard everything from, you know, I've got friends that are on the, you know, UFO side of the spectrum, to people on the other side saying, hey, it's just a coincidence, or it's, you know, just everybody just jumping in because, you know, you're aware of it now, so you're seeing it more now, that whole thing, to something kind of somewhere in the middle, maybe a little more on the conspiracy side, that it's a private contractor that works for Trump and is planning some new surveillance things for when he comes into office. So, you know, it's all over the place. But you're right. In an absence of an explanation, people like to come up with their own explanations, right?
Well, you know, the idea that we're now under surveillance itself is pretty hilarious. But you brought to mind that the remake of War of the Worlds that Tom Cruise did was set in New Jersey. So, you know, you may want to, you know, store up on some water and, I don't know, ramen noodles in your basement there, man.
Well, yeah, because listen, yeah, what's interesting to me is it brings up the, you know, all of a sudden people start thinking about things that maybe they weren't thinking about, well, at least the mainstream, right? So, you know, there's this article in Wired about how, you know, Intel actually privately warned police and the Department of Homeland Security, saying that local jurisdictions should be conducting exercises and planning for this, for an idea of, you know, not saying that this is what's happening now, but, you know, planning for the eventuality of weaponized drones, and that they're, you know, inadequate, that the drone technology is progressing much faster than even, you know, supposedly countermeasures that are offered under, you know, federal guidelines and things, and, you know, more that they're being, you know, increased nefarious activities and at least, you know, minimum non-compliant, you know, flights, and that local authorities wouldn't be able to, you know, intervene. And you saw some of it. Like, I even had some, you know, friends and family where, you know, drones were, you know, going into their backyard, looking, you know, at their pools or whatever, and they called the police, and the police like, yeah, we can't do anything about it. But now all of a sudden, it has a different kind of context to it, right?
Well, this may be a fairly common theme for today's show, but in my 2015 book, Jerk, the last chapter predicted in 2025 drone attacks on the public at large. So none of this is surprising. If anything, I'm surprised that it took this long for it to start becoming prevalent.
Yeah. And maybe these stories connect at some point. Technically, they haven't technically yet, but FTC has banned some of these things, but there's no real, you know, overarching. You know, I heard that something about the airspace. Like there's an area of airspace below where radar can, I guess, I identify it. And then you wonder about, you know, even if it's not overt, you know, weaponized drones, you know, could it be something more, you know, passive, but also concerning, like, you know, China, right? Maybe it's not Iran trying to bomb us, but maybe it's an intel seeking thing. Back to the Chinese balloons. I saw another article this week that the U.S. is mulling banning TP-Link routers because of the Chinese manufacturing connection. According to the Wall Street Journal, TP-Link holds about 65% of the U.S. market for home and small business routers.
Well, parting shot on drone before we switch to that, but very relevant. All these drones transmit as well as receive signal. That's how you can actually fly the thing. So even my own DJI, everything I fly with that machine is transmitted back to DJI in China, where it's manufactured. They keep track of all that stuff. All the video I record with it is all downloaded into the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, the drone itself, I live about a mile from a local airport, and it won't let me fly within a certain distance because the GPS has blacked out that area. Wow. So the notion that nobody knows what's going on with these things, it takes a lot to make one of those things invisible from a radio frequency perspective, like it's transmit and receive. let alone you see the lights on them, but they're very noisy in the radio frequency. So people know what's going on with it. They just don't necessarily want to discuss it yet. So, stay tuned, more to come. In terms of TP-Link, this is another thing that has kind of widely been known in the cybersecurity space for a while. But the hardware, the chips that run these things are so complex from a hardware perspective. You're talking about billions of transistors. If someone built in a set of hardware backdoors, if you will, some set of logic in the chip that gives a backdoor to someone if they just use the right code or whatever, it would be virtually impossible to identify those on that chip. And so that's one of the challenges with a lot of this offshore manufacturing and so forth, is that the vulnerabilities are not only just in like the firmware and software, they can be burned into the hardware and you wouldn't necessarily know it. So it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if this is tied to some kind of discovery of not a software-based vulnerability or exploit, but a hardware one. Something's burned into the chips themselves. And that is extraordinarily difficult to do a software workaround if you follow that logic chain.
Well, yeah, and the paradigm has shifted. The world has shifted, right? I saw something this morning that there's a startup who happens to be an American company. So I don't think there's a Chinese connection, but it's an American company based in California that's making semiconductors and chips, for AI. They now have a bigger AI market share than Intel. Right. So, it used to be say, hey, you watch the big players, right? But now you have, with this AI revolution, you have smaller players, entering the market, both from a software standpoint and a hardware standpoint, makes that whole thing a little bit more tricky.
Intel was a powerhouse, 10, 15 years ago? And I mean, now they're having mass layoffs. It's astonishing how even in an industry where the capital costs are enormous, and the lead time for deploying a multi-billion-dollar chip fab is like 5, 6, 7 years if you get the licenses. So for people to move this quickly, to come up with physical chip manufacturing that just kind of explodes like that is pretty amazing, pretty disruptive.
Databricks got some funding. So for all those who thought the AI funding bubble burst, apparently not. They got about $10 billion in financing, brings their valuation up to $62 billion. And looks like they've actually been operating at a loss, but looks like they're going to be profitable next year.
Yeah. Okay. It's how you become profitable when you go that much more into debt is always interesting. It's certainly a financials engineering sort of thing. And I worked in that space for a long time. How do you cook the books to make it look good? Data, you kind of wonder about their business model. I think that in as much as they are in the world of connecting data pipelines and making data more accessible, as we have this omnivorous, insatiable appetite for data to feed these new AI models, it makes a lot of sense to put money kind of in an upstream process of all that AI stuff. But that, in my mind, also makes it deeply tied to and thus vulnerable to any massive changes in the AI marketplace, which maybe, that's among my predictions for 2025, but we'll get to that. So there's the old saying, like in the gold rush in California in 1849, the people that made the most money were the ones that sold shovels, not the gold miners. So Databricks in this instance is sort of the shovel maker in the AI industry. So they're less likely to lose and more likely to gain. So I think it's actually a pretty smart investment.
I love that. I never heard that. The shovel makers. That's great.
Yeah. Why do you do the digging and take the risk? Just sell the people the shovels and let them do it.
That's great. That's great. Well, and, probably no surprise, but AI related, we're going to talk about this in our 2025 stuff as well, but AI hiring is on the rise, but not always in the areas you think. Salesforce is saying they're going to hire 2,000 salespeople to help push its new AI-powered software. Benioff mentioned this at a company event last week, I believe it was. To help sell its Agent Force AI platform focused on customer support and sales development. So if you're Salesperson looking for a job, Salesforce is hiring.
So I thought AI was going to put people out of work and make people irrelevant. So it's interesting that we got to go hire 2,000 people to go sell it. And then the second thing that comes to mind is those 2,000 new people, why don't they already have a job in this space? And where do they develop their AI expertise if this stuff was invented 7 years ago, at least the latest iteration? Fascinating questions to be asking whoever's doing the recruiting and hiring there.
But I got a better one for you. They're hiring 2,000 people to sell a platform that can do sales development autonomously. So that doesn't show you that it's not quite there yet. That pretty much sums it up, right?
Love him or hate him, Elon Musk has his like the law of Elon, which is the most likely outcome is whatever's the most entertaining. And so I think this follows Elon's law for sure. Let's go hire 2,000 more people so we can sell Salesforce automation. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Last thing I want to mention, which is more of a business headline, a couple of business headlines. FTC again getting tighter on some of these. I was going to say issues. I guess it's eyes in the beholder, but some of these junk fees they call them around hotels, event tickets. They haven't hit airlines yet, I don't think, but I know they have a bunch of airline CEOs have been at Senate hearings this past week. So it turns out that when you buy a concert ticket, a good chunk of those fees are not the ticket.
Yep. No, well, and I just was recently at a hotel and they hit me with some ridiculous resort fee, and I'm like, well, I'm not here to resort. I'm here to sleep. Why am I paying for resorting? And it's an old marketing trick. It's an old marketing game that you play. It's a way of spoofing the whole genre of price shopping engines and shopping agents. So that brings up the question, if I'm going to count even more on agentic AI, which is one of the things we'll discuss in predictions, how do I teach it to figure out that it's being spoofed in this manner? Because a lot of humans can't figure that out right now. So to go after this this genre of marketing approach is, I mean, holy cow, that's an enormous source of revenue, and it's enormous. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of software coders that are recoding this stuff out if it's going to be regulated. But this is a tiny drip in an ocean compared to the degree to which this practice is exercised across a wide range of industries.
Yeah, the first time I ever heard this was actually on my honeymoon. I was in Hawaii. And I get, I'm checking out of one of the hotels and I get the bill, and it's a lot more than I expect it to be. And they say, oh, this is a resort fee. So I asked the woman, what does that mean? What's this resort fee? She goes, oh, it covers various different things. But I'm like, but what does it cover? She's like, well, it covers this, that. And it was like rowboats, and I'm like, well, I didn't use the rowboats, or I didn't use this, or I didn't use that. I'm like, well, you just charge me, right? And I was on my honeymoon, so I didn't want to have a scene in the lobby of the hotel, so I let it go. But that was the first time I heard that, and didn't realize at the time that it was going to be like a like you say, kind of a marketing trick. But you have the same thing happening. I think it's really, really bad. I mean, certainly the tickets. Event tickets and Ticketmaster. We talked about that hearing several weeks ago about some of the stuff going on in the ticket industry, event industry. But the airline industry. I was watching the Senate hearing where it was a senator, congressman, was grilling the CEOs of the discount airlines. I think it was Spirit, Frontier, and I'm not sure. I don't remember what the third one was. And he's talking about almost borderline abusive procedures where, people at the gate are, getting into disputes with customers. You see a lot of these customers gone crazy, but they actually showed some of these gate agents going, and they found out that they were actually paying them commissions to find bags that didn't fit the box and what have you. And hearing this legislator basically tell the CEO, I mean, not basically, he explicitly told the CEO of one of these airlines that flying on their airline is a terrible experience because it happened to him and his wife. It's interesting, but part of it, I think is government's fault. You get back to the question of regulation. A lot of the junk fees on airlines are to avoid federal taxes. So it turns out that the airlines figured out that, part of the actual transportation part of the ticket is taxable, but if they add fees, they're not subject to the same, taxes and tariffs that, the base fare is. So
back to financial engineering, cooking the books.
Right.
I paid attention in my classes at Wharton. So not surprised by that. And I remember there was a legitimate proposal at one point of putting credit card based locks on the bathroom on planes. So you actually have to pay to use the toilet while you're flying. It doesn't end, right? And having worked with one of the travel aggregator platforms, it's different by who's doing, whether it's hotel or airline or whatever, but these add-on fees represent something like 120 to 130% of after-tax profits of these organizations. So they literally take a loss on their core product and they make up for it. More than 100% of the profitability comes from all these add-ons. So that's going to be the practice. And the degree to which regulators kind of wake up to that based upon the complaints and then start acting upon it, well, all right, then they'll shift to another, we're going to start charging for using the toilet or whatever. It's a game of cat and mouse, and the regulators are going to regulate, and those that are going to try to make a profit are going to try to make a profit. So, it's an endless cat and mouse game.
Okay. All right. So I'm getting anxiety thinking about how much I'm overpaying for everything in my life. But
I'd have a lot of anxiety if I'm on the plane and I really need to go and my credit card gets denied, because I don't have a Starlink connection or something.
Hey, all my European friends have been saying we've been doing that for years. You have to pay to use the toilet when you're in public. So, but at least it's there for you. In the US, you got to find it. So. Anyhow, I digress. So, Chris, 2024 is coming to an end. Before we jump into predictions for next year, give us some of your highlights. What was 2024 for you from your perspective?
I think peak generative AI, without question. When we're at the point where we're nearing what, like $500 billion of venture funding going into it. Sam Altman single-handedly rewriting the way that we actually do accounting and define things. What is a business? What isn't a business? Selling stock that isn't stock, profits that aren't profits. It's been astonishing to watch and very entertaining, if a bit disturbing. But I think we're past the peak on generative AI. People are kind of like, hey, wait a minute. This stuff, it doesn't get better over time with more investment. In fact, it's petering out, which is something many of us have been predicting since the start of all this 2 years ago, December. And so I think there's still going to be a bit of a scramble to keep it going, but I think 2024 is going to go down in history as the peak of this wave of this particular AI related technology. FTC is going to continue to get very aggressive. Been writing about that for well over a year and a half now. And even with the incoming administration, there's a lot of momentum towards that. A lot of it also is coming out of Europe. Europe is heavily regulating and even more inclined to do so. So I think, more aggressive action by regulatory bodies has been a theme in 2024 and will continue to grow beyond that. And I think labor disruption is a big one too. I saw an art posting the other day that something like 5 million Americans quit their job in September of this year alone. There was like 4.5 million people left. And then on top of that, there's more than 10 million American men that currently aren't working. So that's an astonishing number of the percentage of the population that's not working. And you have to ask the question, what are they doing? So, I think one of the stories here is this latent labor pool, apparent shortage of jobs, but an overabundance of labor that's somehow going to play out in the next coming years. But I think this is the year where a lot of that came to a head.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I know we do headlines and talk stats on this show, but I'm less and less believing. We had the show last week about misinterpreting or misleading people around AI hype and things, right? I mean, some of these numbers, I just look at the election. I don't believe any of the polling anymore, just because I don't think people are. First of all, I don't think the answers are as black and white and simple as they were 30 years ago. And I don't think that people are maybe as honest. Maybe honest is a strong word, but not as forthcoming with, hey, I'm not working a day job, but I do have this side hustle that my boss doesn't know about, or that I'm not telling the IRS about, or whatever the case may be, right? So I think you have some of that going on. And so, yeah, when you have these kind of black and white numbers, I don't completely, believe them. But yeah, like you say, what are these people doing? They must be sustaining themselves one way or another. So are they doing it in a nefarious way, or are they doing it just in a non-traditional way that doesn't show up in some of these reports or stats or what have you, right?
Well, as reported by the Wall Street Journal, 82.3% of all statistics are made up. Most people don't get that joke. But I think back to Mark Twain, one of my favorite authors. There's lies, damned lies, and then there's statistics. And then, in terms of polling and so forth, it always reminds me of that joke. And I forget who came up with this, but it's so apropos. Like some reporters asking a politician, "So when did you stop beating your wife?" It's all in how you ask the question that generates the result that you want. Hence, there's damn lies and statistics. There's a point at which that game of coming up with numbers and manipulating the numbers to come up with the narrative that you want has really been, I think, another story for 2024 has really been exposed. I mean, no one's hiding it now. It's out in the open. And I think it's making a lot of people, things that make you go, as you just said, do I believe any of this now? And then if I'm questioning it, where do I go to see if it's real or not? So I think there's going to be a real hunger for some baseline truth and honesty now, as opposed to how I feel about things. But that's going to be a hard switch to make.
Yeah, I think for me, a couple things. I mean, I agree with, I think, everything that you're saying. This year was certainly, well, I'll put it this way. It was the year of AI in the sense that nothing else seems to matter. I mean, all of the other emerging tech that we were talking about a year ago. I mean, remember Meta? Remember VR and all that?
Yeah, Google goggles, because
right? Remember blockchain?
That died quick and quiet.
Yeah, I mean, blockchain technology. Remember that? With the exception of crypto, you don't hear much about that. So this was like definitely the year of AI or bust. It was all AI. But I would say, what's changed, and as I speak to a lot of our members on a day-to-day basis, and I think what's happened is it went from, at the beginning of 2024, pure excitement to, I think we're getting to the disillusionment part, Chris, at least from an enterprise standpoint. I see this huge gap between the hype and the excitement of it and the reality of actually implementing it. There's not a whole lot of at scale implementations that have happened. So I think that kind of gap is widening, and anybody who can help close that gap is going to win next year. I guess I'm getting into my 2025 a little bit, but because that's a big chasm to bridge right now, from messing around with it on your own to write an article and implementing it at scale across an enterprise. Big difference. I think this year you had a lot of we used to call in the outsourcing and automation days spot solutions, right? Just little interesting thing here, a little interesting thing there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of crazy, a lot of investment though, a lot of excitement. It's hard to get through a week without seeing 47 announcements from every major tech player on AI, and it's become AI everywhere, where everything that, used to be intelligent or smart is now AI.
Well, and for those of us who've been in the business for a long time, there's such this Groundhog's Day aspect to this. To me, the strongest parallel is when I was formerly with HP, and we can see on LinkedIn, and we had just bought Autonomy, which was this miraculous automation, intelligence platform, changed the world. And we dumped $5 billion into that bad boy, and it just didn't work, or worked like we could get it to work 1% of the time. And I was one of the guys on the team that could make it work 1% of the time. And so we had some initial huge attempts at making the stuff work. But the reality is, you just said, the ground truth of making this stuff work in actual use cases was astonishingly different from kind of the marketing behind it. And now we're just doing that times a factor of 100. And kind of we're following the exact same life cycle, the exact same patterns, which, by the way, is if I'm coming up with predictions for the upcoming year, it comes from, okay, we've been here before. So I don't find it terribly surprising. The magnitude of the buy-in and the delay, the suspension of the level of suspension of disbelief that we're still seeing is what's really stunning to me. But more and more research is coming out, more and more research papers, more and more people are interacting and saying, hey, wait a minute, stuff doesn't work. So I think we're going to see a lot of that sort of initial hangover and then bounce back coming in the next year.
All right, so that's good segue, Chris. So tell me, what are your top 5 predictions for next year?
So I actually wrote them down. Well, pink pad. One of them we already touched upon, and that is increased regulation. The EU just announced, I think in the last couple of days, additional new guidance on AI, which includes, you're starting to see the inclusion of property rights, which is really fundamental to this. Who owns this IP that they're training off of, et cetera, et cetera. As an author, that matters to me. And it's really the basis of knowledge worker and a content sort of society, and that's what we've become. So certainly we're going to see a tremendous amount of regulation coming out of the EU. They're really good at that. But even in the US, to our earlier conversation about the FTC, there's going to be an increase of regulation and even more so enforcement in the US, I think. And that's going to make a much more complicated field to navigate. If you're an international player, and most are, figuring out what I can do in jurisdiction A versus jurisdiction B used to be sort of optional, and I would take my risks and figure it out as I go a little bit. But now you really need to have a lot of forethought in that before you take any big jumps with these technologies and what they're doing. And I think a lot of times also organizations have counted on kind of third-party risk where, well, it's not my fault, it's my platform provider. That isn't going to wash. I think you're going to see a lot more directed action against the people using the platforms, not just the platform providers. So, know your use case very well and get really close with your attorneys and make sure they can spell AI.
Yeah. What else, Chris? Anything else you think's happening?
So my number 2, expect to see this year, and again, this is based on historical precedent, at least one really, really big, really, really ugly BHAG failure around AI. There was one note, I think about a week ago on LinkedIn, where a healthcare company had deployed AI to review billing. And as soon as they deployed it, it rejected 90% of all billing submissions, whether they were right or wrong. So yeah, that's getting towards bigness, but it's not going to be like your Sony moment, the really ugly one. But as we were saying earlier, 2024 was the year where people started trying to do big enterprise scale deployments of generative AI. So next year, 2025, is when we're going to see at least one of those go fully thermonuclear and wipe out a third of the company's valuation overnight. I would love to be able to predict who that is, as would anybody that's playing the stock market. But we're going to see at least one of those, and I would argue it's probably in the first 6 months of the year. Just as people get to the point where they're deploying and it's in production, and now it's just a matter, the ticking time bomb has been set.
Well, I would have said you were crazy maybe a few months ago, but it happened, right? It happened not on an AI thing, but it happened this year with Microsoft and that outage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, or Google, whatever it was early in the year, they just announced that they're releasing the new version of it, and Gemini, and it's going to be amazing. Okay, it'll be amazing until it's not. So I think there's plenty of examples. And it's that momentum thing. There's so much momentum behind it. People are going to drive and try to make this stuff succeed, even when there's significant signal that something's going to go horribly wrong. So then you have your Challenger accident, or you have your 3 Mile Island, and then people will start saying, whoa, well, let's pull back a little bit. So, we're going to have the Chernobyl, the 3 Mile Island, the Fukushima at some point, and I'm expecting it's the first 6 months of 2025.
But you're saying there's something interesting, though. You didn't say this explicitly, but I'm implying from what you said, which is that the majority of people, or maybe the tendency will be to be more aggressive next year than this past year, because I've seen very much, if I were to put a meter on it, I would say, we were way too close to conservative from an enterprise standpoint, not from the standpoint of, what OpenAI is doing and testing, right? But I would say from a large enterprise implementation standpoint, we are still way too close, in my opinion, on the conservative side of things. So you're saying maybe that pendulum shifts.
Well, so 2024 was the year of commitments. Yeah, like $1 trillion went in. So there's going to be an expectation of returns within a year. So the commitments were made last year. The do or die is happening now. Right. And you either did or you died is going to be about 6 months from now. Have these 20 something years of doing implementations. It's to me, that's very clearly the pattern. So those folks that really, you're almost assuming there's a degree of doubling down. There absolutely is, because those people that said, give me $20 million and I'll transform your business last year, you've burned through 15 million of it and you're still not ready, and so forth. So now people are really committed to trying to get over the line. And that's usually when we get kind of not lazy, but we get less careful about what we're doing, right? Maybe we'll skip a couple of tests. Maybe we'll just deploy without verification or something. We're going to do what we need to try to prove that we were right. And that's usually when we find out that we were pretty wrong.
Yeah. All right, I think that was 1, 2, and 3. What's 4 and 5, Chris?
Well, no, all right. So 3, I had agentic AI.
Okay.
Which it's gonna explode as it kind of has the last 3 months, and then it's gonna die quick and quiet because it's just generative AI 2.0. It's a different color of lipstick on potentially a digital pig. So you just don't get deeply vested in agentic. It's like RPA 2.0. Number 4 to me is, and I'm anticipating, and this is based upon lots of experience with this, somewhat the next big thing that's going to replace generative AI, transformers, is going to hit in the next 3 or 4 months. It's probably already been released. There's probably a white paper on it somewhere out there. A lot of people are talking about RAG, or some other. The next big technology thing is coming. I think back to my autonomy days. Autonomy. Hey, there's this thing called Hadoop. Remember Hadoop? It was all the rage in 2015, 2016, and so forth. So, and that took over until RPA did. So whatever's the next generative AI, it's probably out there. It's just sort of undiscovered at this point. And in the first 3 to 6 months of 2025, it'll be noticed. So stay tuned. Gartner, Forrester, all those guys will start writing about it probably in February.
Or you, Chris. It can be you.
It could be. I wouldn't want to jinx it by writing about it.
No prediction on what it's going to be, though, huh?
It has to be fundamentally different from Transformers, because Transformers is brilliant, great idea, just like what the underlying technology of autonomy was, but it was overplayed and overextended, and it's kind of reached its zenith. It's demonstrated its limitations, so it's got to be something else. The basic challenge here is we're trying to get deterministic results from a probabilistic technology, and that just doesn't work. And what I mean by that is, generative AI is taking its best guess at what the next word is. We want to take those guesses that it's producing for us and assume that it's accurate, and we can't do that. So anything that reduces that error rate, which is something we've been working on for decades, is going to be the thing that hopefully recovers some proportion of this multi-trillion dollars we've invested. And so it's going to be something that, and agentic ain't it, because agentic is just doing more generative AI more emphatically. It's going to be something that complements what transformers do to generate a better result. I'm just not precisely sure what that is yet.
All right. Any final ones, Chris, before I give you my list?
Actually, I had a fifth, but I think you said before I already covered it. So yeah, give me your five. Can't wait to hear it.
So, I mean, similar stuff. You have a kind of interesting take on some of that. The labor thing is something that I've followed for a long time. I didn't put it on my list because I don't know if it's going to happen this year or not, but I definitely do think there's going to be a major labor market paradigm change in the next few years. So we'll see if it's a next year thing or a later thing. But yeah, I mean, top of my list is so I've been referring to 2024 as the, if the end of 2023 was like the birth of Gen AI, we know it wasn't, but it was kind of for a lot of people, the mainstream, right? If 23 was kind of the introduction to it, I think 24 was, the adoption revolution around AI, the democratization of AI for a lot of people who never touched AI or see what's inside the black box that AI was. So I think 24 was the year where most people kind of touched it for the first time. I think 25 is going to be the year of kind of enterprise grade AI. I think you're going to see a move towards maybe smaller language models, but where companies can finally take some of the capabilities behind some of this Gen AI stuff and apply it to a larger data, a customized data source that's not just the internet, client data, CX data, customer data, perhaps. And so I do think there's going to be some pretty significant, what we used to call it, narrow AI, significant applications of Gen AI in narrower use cases. You took at IDP, for example, intelligent document processing. I mean, that's ripe for, a flip upside down. So I think you're going to, that kind of chasm that I mentioned between the hype and the reality of some of this, I think is going to be implemented this coming year. So that was kind of first on my list. The second on my list was, as you said, agentic AI. I mean, if you look at the list of, Google, Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, I mean, they're all either launching or planning on launching major agentic AI agents. I have a little bit of a different take on it than you, I think. I actually think it's going to be more of a thing. Maybe I don't disagree with the quality of what you said, right? In the sense that, it's not going to be as revolutionary quality wise as people think it might be. But I think it's going to be pretty pervasive in the sense that I think in 2025, AI is going to come to you. I don't think you're going to have to go and get it. I think it's going to be built into, I think by the end of 25, it's going to be everywhere. We're going to be searching with it. It's going to be in every social media platform. Everything that you do, it's going to be built in, whether you like it or not. You're not going to have to go find AI and download it onto your computer to use it. So I think that's going to be, I think we're going to get closer, like it or not, for good or bad. I think we're going to get closer to that vision that a lot of people had years ago of like an agent for every person. I think we get to that point next year, but yeah.
Well, and since we come from RPA as one of our background, I mean, this was the shift in RPA from we're going to automate the entire process to task-based automation. There was the vision of it, and then there's the on-the-ground reality of it. So I think agentic AI is that sort of generative AI actually starts doing something useful, but it's in little bite-sized chunks, to your point.
Yep. Yeah. And I think you get, you get related to that, but as my third was, kind of this idea of AI built into everything. I've kind of alluded to it before, right? I think whether it is AI or it's not AI, everything that you buy, everything that you consume is going to have some sort of, AI component to it, machine learning component to it, Gen AI component to it. You're seeing it's almost like they used to use the marketing phrase was, Intel inside, although that's ironic because Intel's losing in the battle. But
Thank you.
It's going to be kind of like AI inside. Like everything you do, everything you consume, every piece of software that you use is going to have AI inside. I've seen some really interesting things in retail, in ERP, in sales. We talked about. I even saw an article this week that OnlyFans creators are using AI agents to talk to all their followers. So if you're on OnlyFans, it ain't her. That's all I'm saying.
Embedded averageness, digital gray goo everywhere.
Yeah, that's what you said, right?
Well, and the irony is that the more we do that, the more the human touch matters more. I mean, it's a horrible example, but to your OnlyFans, if you get an actual message from the creator, that's a huge deal. Everyone else gets something fake. So again, very predictable, something many of us have been warning about for a very long time.
Premium concierge service, right?
Oh, what's the old joke where, push 2 if you want to talk to an automated agent. Otherwise we'll talk. Yeah, it's kind of back to that. If you want to use the toilet, you got to swipe a credit card. If you want to talk to a human, you're going to have to swipe a credit card.
Yep. So that's 1, 2, 3. My fourth is infrastructure and hardware for AI. I mentioned that chip manufacturer that kind of came out of nowhere and now has a bigger market cap than Intel. We've talked about the data center requirements, the power requirements, the energy requirements of all this stuff, of people like Mark Zuckerberg trying to build nuclear reactors. So I think while so much of this year has been focused on the software of AI, I think in a lot of ways 25 is going to be the year of hardware around AI. And my fifth is security and disinformation. I think the battle is going to heat up, for AI, cybersecurity, AI, back and forth, right? The AI is going to get better at penetrating and putting out disinformation. Then the AI is going to get better at combating that. So I think you're going to see this kind of power shift over the next year.
I do want to go back to where you start with labor and make that my fifth. The other aspect of the labor thing, and I forget the exact number, but in the United States, the average age of a tradesperson, so a welder, a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, is something like 57 years old. Wow. The entire world of tradespeople is about to retire. I don't know if you've tried to get an appointment to get your car worked on recently, but you're on a waiting list for like 2 months. So as much as we're trying to get people with AI experience and AI salespeople, there's nobody to fix your car. There's nobody to add a deck to your house if you can get a house. And so I think that there's gonna be a huge shortage of that in-person manual labor, kind of sort of looked down upon in our society, but we're going to be in desperate need of those people. And that sort of skill set is going to be at an extreme premium going forward. And somehow we better start pricing that in because, as you just said, hardware is going to be critical going forward. Someone's got to build and maintain that stuff. And so to me, that's a massive labor shortage that we're going to face. And it's an entirely different skill set than what we've been focused on for a couple of decades. Yeah.
Well, listen, exciting stuff. I love it. It's gotten some additional excitement going on over here. There's a couple other things that I'll just throw out there that are we focused all on AI because AI is really first, second, third, fourth, fifth on the list. But there's some really interesting advances in neurological interfaces, Neuralink and things like that. That I think are going to be pretty interesting for next year. Physical robots, we don't talk a lot about that, but there's some really interesting advances happening in physical robots. And I was at a restaurant yesterday where a robot brought me my drinks and stuff. So, but there's some medical applications. We're seeing them in like the supermarkets now, right? So I think physical robots. And then the big one that I think is kind of maybe the most exciting thing from my perspective, other than, all of this AI stuff, is what they're now calling spatial computing, kind of the combination of the AR, the VR, the mixed reality, and some of the, even IoT stuff that we've talked about in the past, kind of all coming together for spatial computing. I think that could be something that we look back at 2025 and say, yeah, AI, but also this.
Again, when I was at HP 10 years ago, we had a technology, one of those 3D rendering spatial technologies. I forget the name of it now, but we had amazing use cases where you'd put on the goggles and you could you would get guided on how to do maintenance on an airplane engine or something, and it would literally guide you as you went there. If you went through a grocery store and you looked at a particular box cover, it would produce a real like an interactive commercial right there in your vision space. So that was 10 years ago. We could do amazing stuff then. Add in all the capability and capacity we've built in that last decade, you could do amazing virtual reality stuff. But again, that takes me back to what we were just discussing, where I need people in the non-virtual, in the reality to keep this stuff running. Yeah. So in as much, we have to always keep in mind, useful technologies don't supplant humans, they support humans. We always want to keep the humans in the loop with this stuff. So that sort of enhancement technology is going to generate much better results than trying to come up with something that fully replaces humans. This is something we've been having to relearn for about 2 millennia now, and it seems to get lost on us again and again.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been fun, buddy, and thanks for all your support and joining us so many times this year on the show. I really appreciate it. Everybody who's watching, we're off until January 8th. So check us out there. In the meantime, if there's anything that you need help with, reach out to me or my team. Happy to connect you with folks like Chris and others, get you the answers that you're looking for as you're planning for next year. We're working for the next week or so, but we'll be back with the Digital Leaders Show on January 8th. In the meantime, enjoy your families, enjoy the holidays, whatever you're celebrating, and Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2025.
See you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.